All right, we are live. So I've never done this with someone else before, and I
First
only
live in a while for me. It's been a long time.
you've done it before, right?
So I think with Nate on the content recruiter, we went live, but I think it was just the audio version actually, and then a couple of webinars during the good old COVID days, which weren't that good and weren't that old actually. So,
Nice.
but yeah, first time in a while.
Nice. What'd you guys use? Did you use this StreamYard or
I
something
think
else?
I can't remember. I think it might have been, yeah, this looks familiar. Duck with some headphones on. It's close enough.
Nice. Yeah.
That's the logo, not you.
Yeah, exactly. I just started live streaming just in the last couple of months with my political campaign. So
Nice.
still fairly new to it, and this is the first time I've done it with someone else, so had to kind of figure that out. But yeah, I guess we can't see who joins, right? We just can see how many people are viewing, right?
Yeah,
Typically
presumably
with these
so.
live streams.
But it looks like we're live on LinkedIn now, which is good. So
Cool.
that notification just come through, which is really, really, really cool. Awesome.
Nice. Yeah, and Facebook and YouTube as well.
Got it.
So yeah, and it's being recorded, so we can just get started and start riffing. And so I can do a quick intro to kind of how this started if you want, and then we can kind of get into it. So Nathan and I have known each other since COVID, I think, right? I think it was 2020 we first met in kind of the recruiting space. And for the last probably year, maybe more, we've gotten together every other week, sometimes every week via Zoom. Nathan's in the UK, I'm in the US. It's early for me when we talk. And yesterday, and we just talk about kind of where things are in our lives, in our careers. We bounce things off of each other. We're sounding boards for each other. And yesterday, in our conversation, we kind of realized we're at a very similar inflection point in our careers, and we just started talking about it. And I think I had made the comment that it's just too bad this wasn't recorded for other people who it might be helpful to. And I think Nathan said, well, maybe we should do it again. And so this concept of a live event came up, and that's how we're here. And we're both going through what could be very large pivots. And so, Nathan, you want to kick it off and talk a little bit about what's your pivot and like what's led to that? Where were you and where are you looking to go?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's been massive actually. So where do we start? 3 years ago, well, 4 years ago, we welcomed our first son into the world. So little Milo, who's 4, who's going to school for the first time in September. And then a couple of years after that, or 16, 18 months or so, Jacob arrived, so my second son. And throughout the last 4 years, when you combine COVID, another kind of huge person, but look, we're very transparent on our calls anyway. So my father passed away in 2021, 22. So it's February 2020, 21. And so there was a heap of things going on with like the boys, like personal stuff, work. My wife hadn't gone back to work. She was looking at the boys. And it was really a period of life where for 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, I've just been churning through work just to keep cash coming in. I think there was an element of a lack of kind of self-reflection time where I just stepped back and said, like, what am I doing? Like, are you actually enjoying this? And I know that the answer was no. Like we've spoken for long enough now, a couple of years, about recruitment. And I think for me, recruitment was always intriguing because of the size of the market, the revenue opportunities, the lack of innovation in that space, particularly, which always led me to an element of frustration. I always thought I could do something to change it and build something. And to be honest, I think that really, like, I love innovation. I love building stuff. I love trying to make things better, but it wasn't really underpinned by any kind of passion. And part of me was like, recruitment is great because you put people in new jobs and you impact their lives massively. But I think in reality, as a recruiter, I think you know, at times there's an element of you really have no control. When someone joins a business, you really don't have any impact on them at all. It's really up to sink or swim. Do they enjoy that environment or they don't? And so, yeah, for kind of 4 years, I've been doing something the last 4 years that I don't particularly enjoy. I've been in recruitment for 12 years, and I think certainly during COVID and other significant events in life, I've just really lost sight of why like I'm doing stuff. And yeah, I decided to like really think about what it is that makes me tick, and what problem in the world am I actually going to try and solve. And so it's led me to launching a community for dads who want to improve their like physical health and fitness, and ultimately hopefully their mental health off the back of it, to give their kids better life or a better life. It kicked off 4 weeks ago. We're at like 250 dads now, and it's just been like the most incredible early stage of the process, and something that like I don't ever recall having so much passion for a project in my working life. It's just been a mad kind of 4 weeks, and you know, my intention wasn't actually to leave recruitment so early. My intention was to continue and run Dadversity as a side project, so it wasn't going to be this huge career pivot that we speak about. But you know, eventually that's changed over the last couple of weeks. I've decided just to leave the world of recruitment, focus only on Dadversity. There's no magic money tree at the end of the street, so it's going to lead me to a path of ultimately doing something I don't particularly enjoy to generate revenue, which is probably going to be something like driving a taxi or an Uber or something, which is very, very humbling at a time of life where I thought I'd be on a beach and retired. But I think it's made me realize that actually the purpose of doing something like Dadversity makes doing something that I don't want to do to generate revenue in the short term like much, much easier. So it's been a wild few weeks, to be honest. It's been like pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot has come together quickly for you, and I'm part of your community, and I've seen it. I've seen that passion come through in the last month or so, right? And it's fun to see. I think that energy is contagious. I know it kind of has been for me. It's kind of pushed me. I kind of fell off my exercise routine, which was pretty solid for at least 3 years, pre-pandemic, right? I had a streak just up until May of having ridden my Peloton every week since August of 2020. And this month would have made it 3 years. So a little pissed that I broke that, but sometimes life happens, right? But and it's gotten me out of my routine, and this challenge that you've done has kind of sparked. Like yesterday, you kind of mentioned mental health, right? And I think I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I think everybody goes through some form of mental challenge, either currently or at some point in their life they have or will. And if they don't or haven't, they're probably just lying to themselves, right? Or they don't recognize it. Yesterday, probably about 2:00, 2:30, I started to just feel a lot of anxiety. I'm like, this is not, I haven't felt that way in a while.
Yeah.
And when I feel that way, the only thing I can do is I got to get away from my desk. I got to go do something, usually run. But we have a lot of wildfires here in Spokane, Washington right now, and the air quality has been crap. So can't even go out for a walk.
You want to do that? Yeah.
So hopped in my Peloton, and it wasn't like hey, I just want to go cruise. It was I need to get some shit out, right? And did an interval training and just like hit it hard. And when you've taken some time off, man, the heart rate spikes a little bit. I was at 100% of my heart rate, and that hasn't probably never happened. But yeah, I mean, I think you just got to take care of yourself, and I think it life's too short. You realize you mentioned like having some challenges in your life that you kind of reflected on. And same here. like, and this is kind of how our conversations go. We're, like you said, we're very transparent. We're very open because that's what it's about. And beginning of the year, my parents got, I was informed my parents were getting a divorce after 47 years. My dad and I don't really talk right now. So it's basically like I lost a parent in a different way. My cousin died, who was like a big brother to me. He was only 52. He died in May. And so I've just been battered this year by one thing after another. I thought 2020 was shit, but this year's it's topped it, right? And so I think when we go through things like you and I have, and everybody goes through stuff, right? Sometimes there's a trigger, a catalyst that makes us think, like, realize really, like, life's too short, man. And we've done a lot to put ourselves in a position to where we could have options. And I feel like that's where we both are right now. I feel like we've done a lot. For me, I mean, I'm middle of my career, probably, which means you start getting discriminated against by recruiters. And you know how that goes. Which means you have to make a decision. I don't think the current world of work wants us to work beyond a certain age, but I think the dynamics of work and life have changed to where a lot of people want to work beyond traditional retirement ages. Because what else are you going to do, man? Like, unless you're just super rich and can just travel all over the place. And I don't know, like, I would be bored out of my mind, especially in the wintertime when I can't get out in my yard and garden. So what are you going to do? And I want to keep my brain active. I want to keep learning. I want to keep doing things, and the world's going to change, and I want to change with it, right? And so I view it as I've worked for about 20 years, and I've got about 20 years left. And when I look at, and we talked about this yesterday, when I look at the last 20 years, I'm like, what the hell have I done?
Yeah.
I haven't followed a linear career path. I'm not like climbing some ladder where every step's led to something chronologically, and I've built so much momentum that I can't possibly do something different. Like, no, like, and I think, what if I stayed the course for the next 20 years? What will that do? And I just think nothing really. I mean, it will, but it won't, right? And so, I think we both are in a place where we want to help other people. We want to make the world a better place. And I've mentioned it to you that I think the world's turned into a shithole right now with everything politically, climate wise. Like, it's just, the media is probably over sensationalizing a lot, but it also isn't. And so I just feel like, man, I want to do something that in some way, I feel like I'm doing my part to make the world a better place for my kids and what they're going to grow up into. What are we going to leave them with? And that's kind of what's kind of my North Star right now is like, what can I do? Do I need to make a big pivot? Can I do take what I'm doing now, make that work? I think it's the fact that we're both in a position, I think, and I don't want to speak for you. You can talk to this too, but in a position where we want to give ourselves options. When you have options, you can make decisions. When you don't have options, decisions get made for you, right? And so I think we want to have that control over our lives, our careers. And so yeah, what do you want to add?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, for me, it's I think I'm more kind of listening to signals as they go, and I'm probably not the best to think like longer term. I've never really been that way inclined. I usually think about kind of short-term goals and listening to kind of signals as we go to get an understanding of whether we're on the right track. And so I think, look, the overarching goal is for me and Dadversity now, and now I've stepped away from recruitment, is how can we give dads this knowledge and help them build the resilience to give their kids like the best start in life. And so that's like the overarching, the mission for the community. But what's really interesting to me and what I observe, one thing you touched on there is I think people are reluctant to make these little changes to their career once they've been in an industry for X amount of years, months, but whatever time, because they feel like they're going to go back to nothing again, and they're going to have to start from the bottom and work again, and they're going to lose a ton of revenue, and they're going to lose all this stuff. And actually, there's a part of that that's probably right. I mean, you probably are going to take a drop in salary, and you've got to find a way to, I guess, build that back up if you've got responsibilities and mortgages and all that good stuff. But I think that the thing that's been most interesting for me is when I've flipped over to something I actually care about and I've established, and I can't believe it's taken me 12 years to figure this out, to be honest. It's ridiculous. But I mean, some of the times I've had in recruitment have been great. I mean, there's been it's not all been 12 years of absolute misery. It's been more the last 3 or 4, to be honest. But the thing that I found most intriguing is I've obviously started working on a new project now for no money at all, and Dadversity is not going to generate any revenue for probably 12 to 18 months, which is why I need to go and get another job to subsidize the cost of living. I've got more satisfaction out of the little milestones using the skills that I've developed in recruitment to build Dadversity. And so what I mean by that is the satisfaction from launching, editing, and delivering a new podcast for Dadversity and seeing like the first few bits of engagement come in, the first 50 listens from the community and everything else, massively outweighed anything that I ever got from doing like anything in recruitment. I can just like, you're sitting there listening, watching the listens go through. So I posted about Dadversity on LinkedIn and got a huge kick from seeing all of the positive feedback that was coming through. And I never expected anywhere near the response, which was like 300,000 impressions and 1,800 reactions and a couple of hundred comments. Like it was big relative for me and what I posted previously. It's a massive piece of engagement. And so seeing those signals come through and realizing like doing the work that you actually want to do and how it aligns with like the mission that you're on and everything else, and seeing people react to it positively gives you so much more than if I'd have continued on the path of doing recruitment. I know it's hard to explain, isn't it? Because a lot of it is cliche, but I can only talk about my experience. And my experience was chase the revenue. That's basically been what my goals have been built upon: buy a bigger house, nicer car, yada, yada, yada. And I realized that without having the passion for actually doing the job, the revenue never came. And so the weekends would roll around and I'd just be in a foul mood because I'd not hit my work targets. I'd have to spend all weekends reacting to the kids going nuts in the house or at the park and just like herding cats all weekend. And then I'd come back through on Monday morning, pissed off and fed up because I've had to do a job that I don't particularly like, but I had this overarching goal of just chasing revenue. And it was just a messed up way of viewing things. Like the revenue never comes when you're chasing it. I mean, maybe it will, maybe you'll have periods where it does come, but it's never sustainable. And I think that's been the biggest learning for me, like on this, like during this short process so far, is like using the skills you've already developed in your career will help accelerate you in another field very, very quickly. Like, there's no doubt about that. You've got a lot of skills that you have, and if you're scared of pivoting in your career and you're concerned that that's going to hold you back, like it might do in the short term. But A, there's ways of getting money on the side if you need to. And B, it's just a short term. Like if you can stomach it for 12 months, you're probably going to accelerate yourself very quickly in a career you actually want to do. But then, yeah, the other thing is like just not chasing the revenue has been a massive eye opener for me.
Yeah, and we've got a comment, and I'll hit on that in a second because I think it's very relevant to our experience in recruitment. Because I was once a recruiter as well, and chasing the money. I mean, I think that's where I got off track, you know, back in 2021, probably, or I mean, not 2020, 2001. I mean, that's how old I am. And like you said, like
I was going to school, by the way.
Yeah, I was tramping around in Los Angeles having a grand time. But like you said, the revenue the income never came. I mean, it has. I'm not saying like I've just struggled my entire career. I haven't.
Yeah.
But I'd say it might have been more struggle than not, more than it needs to be. And I think my heart's never really been in it. Marketing, of all the things I've done of sales and recruitment, which is essentially sales, marketing is the most fun I've had, the thing I've enjoyed the most, but it still feels forced. It still feels like it's
something on that.
Not
if the revenue, so I mentioned it there, you mentioned it, chasing the revenue, I think, is just a recipe for disaster. And so, but if the revenue came, would you think you'd be more tolerant sort of bearing it, running a model and a business that was generating lots of revenue? Because I think part of, for me, is I never really had a passion to do recruitment. And so, but I think I could have probably scaled a company in recruitment if I'd have really, really like focused on doing it. Not easily, it would have been hard because it's a very, very busy market. But I'm curious to see what the reaction would be if suddenly you were at like, I don't know, 100K in monthly recurring revenue and you're building out quite a significant team, and whether that would have changed things or not. Like, do you think that would have changed things for you?
Possibly, but I think it's also would change what I do. Right. I wouldn't just be executing and hands-on. You wouldn't be just recruiting. You'd now be building a business, which is a whole different skill set, whole different thing. And it might be that part that you start to enjoy and make it like, yeah, I could do this, especially at this income level. But I don't think, well, go back to when I was recruiting. I don't think any amount of money would have created happiness for me. Right. And part of it is just, I get bored quick. Part of it is I just don't like doing the same thing every day. Like it's Groundhog Day and I wake up to Sonny and Cher and just do this again. Right. I just cannot operate like that. I like to do different things and have variety. And plus part of it has always felt like this is not the best use of my abilities, natural abilities. And, I'm not a super religious person, but I think we all have innate abilities that we're born with that we can then strengthen and turn into strengths, or they can complement other things to turn them into strengths. and thinking about how, growing up all the way through undergrad, and then compared to what I've been doing for the last 20 years, so different. And I feel like I am not using what I was given, if it's from God or whatever, to its fullest. And I feel like I'm wasting it. Right. And so and that's bugged me a lot.
We're at slightly different stage. I mean, there's what, like, I don't know, 8-10 years in it or something, but slightly different stage in our career. What would be the thing that stopped you saying, you know what, I'm going all in on just chasing like something I'm just passionate about, like genuinely care about? Or should we wait? We've got Julia, haven't we? We've got a question from Julia here. We should probably
to answer that really quickly, I'd say it's money. Because back to money and that fear of going backwards, right? And Julia has a comment here where she's mentioned that, it's less about starting over in the money, but more about landing the interview when you're seen as either way overqualified or out of industry. And I think it's a very valid as recruiters, we know that very well. It's very hard to pitch, to tell a story, that isn't linear. And I think that used to be more important to me than it is now. Because now I don't care, because I know recruiters aren't going to be able to make shit out of my resume. So it's time to form relationships, right? And that to me is going to be the key to overcoming that fear, that piece of it.
Yeah, and I get Julia's point. I I always look at that challenge as, well, it's a challenge, first of all, but I almost look at it through more of a kind of creative lens. So we spoke yesterday, Travis, on our like every couple of week call, and basically said, you've got a real passion for like gardening, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And just the environment and nature.
And the environment in general, nature. Yeah. And we were chatting about what would a career pivot look like for you at this stage in life. And you've got a lot of marketing experience. I think marketing is one of those skills that's obviously transferable across industries. And so it's maybe less challenging for you to go to a nature outdoorsy gardening company. I have no knowledge of that industry. So I'm throwing out random buzzwords that come to my mind, but it's a lot easier for you to go to those companies and say, hey, look, this is my passion. Here's a really creative video, and probably get a conversation with them for a marketing role. I think outside of like marketing, just trying to think of any other spaces, maybe engineering or something, it's probably a bit more difficult, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I'll take like Julia's point as well. It's hard. Like you're gonna have to probably drop revenue coming in, drop income, and then fight your way into an industry. That's what it is, isn't it? It's a scrap to get in the industry. And I'm sure, people like Julia have got great skills that probably fit in somewhere inside of a business and an industry that they like. And I think that's, so how I would break this down is we're coming out of recruitment. I think part of recruitment is exactly what you said earlier. I think part of it is sales. I think part of it is marketing to a degree. There's also some other like soft skills you develop around recruitment. I think I would just start very basically by just listing all those things out and figuring out which parts of them you're good at, which parts of them you like, and then trying to translate that inside of an industry or a product that you actually want to get involved and sell or be a part of. And that's probably where I would start. And that's where we spoke about yesterday with your stuff around nature and gardening. It's like, can we get the transferable marketing skills inside of that industry to enable you to do something that you genuinely love? So that's what I would do.
Yeah. And I think thinking about my pivot, why it might be so radical. And you asked me yesterday, why wouldn't you just kind of take your marketing experience, sales experience, all this stuff and maybe go apply it at a company versus what I'm considering, which is very different, very radical, which is going to law school. At age 48, I'd be over 50 by the time I was done with it. And I think the common way of thinking would be like, hey, you're too old. Why do you want to start over? That's a lot of work. You have 3 kids. You're, for some reason, running for city council, doing all this stuff. You got a lot on your plate. Why would you do that? And the way I'm looking, and I asked, and so I have a friend that I went to high school with who is a lawyer, and I think she's in environmental law. I didn't get a ton of time to talk with her when I was back in Indy, where I grew up. A couple of weeks ago, when I was back for a class reunion, we chatted briefly, and then when I got home, because I'd been thinking about it for a while, of taking the LSAT, maybe going back to school, and I messaged her and I said, "Am I?" I said, "Hey, I'm scheduled to take the LSAT in January. Have I absolutely lost my mind?" And her reply was, "No, absolutely not, because at least if you do well, you'll have options."
Yeah.
And that's where I started to think, like, she's right. Like, if I don't do well, my options are narrowed, and then it is, okay, how can I apply what I'm doing now or what I've done? If I do well and could potentially get in somewhere, now I've got an option and I've got a decision that I need to make, right? What time commitment, what am I sacrificing in the short term? And what do I expect to get in the long term? And in the long term, it's not monetary. It's, how will this affect my happiness? How will I feel like I'm doing something better, right? And I like marketing. I love marketing, but I love this other stuff more. I mean, my undergrad degree is in environmental science, right? And especially water resources. And I just feel like that's where I need to be. That's what I feel like I have been engrossed in my entire life in some fashion. And I need to just be there. And I feel, and when I went to grad school and was getting my MBA, the class I most remember and the one I enjoyed the most was business law. And I was just like, I'm not going to go back to school after this.
Yeah.
And then I told you when I was several years ago, I was on a plane sitting next to somebody, and the whole "what do you do" conversation came up, and he mentioned that he's in environmental law, and it's something I never even connected the dots on with my degree. And this was before I went to grad school and had that business law class. But that just kind of cemented it for me a little bit. I never put it together. I'm like, man, maybe that is a path I should have gone. And it's not that I have regrets. It's that I need to explore these options further. Maybe law school is not it, but I want to give myself options. And if that means studying from now until January, a couple hours, several hours a week to give myself an option, I'll do that. Right. And so yeah, I mean, it just feels like the path I've been on for the last 20 years has not been the path that I'm meant to be on. And it's always mentally, I've had cognitive dissonance with everything I've done as a result.
Yeah. There's another layer of probably complexity in this as well, in that we are, what's the best way to say this? Like, certainly, so since I'm 35, since I was 21, I've always like had this idea of just working for myself, and I think there's probably been like maybe a 18-month period within that time scale where I've not worked for myself, and I've just been doing like little startups. I've got all the domain names to show the scars and all that sort of stuff, right? And I think that's another layer of complexity in this, is I'm just not built to get an employed role, and for whatever reason I just can't for some reason bring myself to do it. And I think that maybe plays a part in your mind as well, doesn't it? Because you've been like startup world for a couple of years now, and longer, way longer, isn't it? And I think there's an element of this feeling of getting a proper job doesn't then give you the space to go and experiment with some of the things and the passion projects you actually want to do. And that's also on my mind as well. And I think that adds a bit more complexity to the situation. It's not just about switching jobs, is it? It's about still giving, from a personal perspective, still having the personal freedom to not have to be at a desk 9 to 5 and all that sort of stuff as well. So do you think that kind of that plays into your mind as well? It's like, how can I maintain a level of flexibility and find the passion project that's going to keep like the fire burning for the next however many years you're going to be working?
Absolutely. When I've tried to go back and work for other people, I mean, before I went back out on my own in 2021, I was a director of marketing for a company based here in the US in Denver. I was there for 5 or 6 years, and that's longer than I thought I would be. Yeah. Given that I do value freedom, choice, and freedom to kind of be my own boss, and wanted to get back to that. And I talked with the president of that company, like, about, hey, at some point I do want to get back to working for myself, for trying to build something myself. And then I tried to go back and work for somebody last fall, and it was really hard, right? Really hard. But I think, and thinking about what you're talking about, driving an Uber or a cab, and while you're trying to build this thing, I think there's a time and a place for a job that's just there to provide income, right?
Sure.
And I think after you have some experience like we have, the thought of just taking a job without anything else, it's terrifying. And so I feel like when I had those jobs, or the last one really kind of felt more like a job last fall, there wasn't really a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why it felt like a job. Whereas if you are taking a job, you know, hey, this is not my life, this is not my career. It's a way, what means to what, like, it's a step to get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to show up and do that. Like when I was in college, I had shit jobs in the summertime, awful, horrible. But I knew, like, hey, this is to pay for college, and college is going to be, that next step. And when there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it's easier to get up in the morning and do those things that you would never under any other circumstance want to do. Right. And so I think about, if I get into law school and I decide to go back, it actually would be much easier for me to work for someone else, because I know, hey, this isn't permanent. This isn't my career ladder. This is something that I do. It's an agreement between me and the employer. You need this job done. I need money. We'll exchange those things, right? Like,
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a transaction, while I'm building something else that feels more meaningful. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of people are afraid to take a job, thinking like, oh, I'm like going like, what am I doing? My career, this isn't a career move. I'm going in reverse. What will people think of me? I think that's like a big block, and something that people just need to stop thinking about. Worry about yourself, right? Take care of yourself and stop worrying about what other people are doing, what they have. Because when you chase that shit, like what you and I've talked about, it's going to go nowhere, right? You're going to be unhappy. You're going to keep constantly comparing yourself to these people on LinkedIn or wherever, and they're not sharing the bad shit, right? They're not sharing the deaths in their family, the struggles they're having, the mental health challenges. Not sharing any of that, because that's not what they want to portray themselves as, right? And so you're thinking of you're comparing yourself in a vacuum that doesn't exist, right? It's impossible, the way that I think people compare themselves to others in their mind, right? And so I think you just got to chase what you want. And I think you had mentioned something about passion. I think there's a difference, because passion is, people have mentioned it, Cal Newport and other people, passion's an emotion, and emotions aren't sustainable. But I think purpose is, right? And then I think passion will show up at times to fuel you through when you feel like you have a purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know what to label it as, but I just know that if you are, so in my situation, when business has been hard in recruitment, either like financially or just a difficult project or a difficult client or whatever, like whatever challenges you face, I think it's quite telling how much effort you put in during the difficult times, and how much, how deep into the trenches you're willing to go when things are difficult. And I can honestly say that in the last 3 years, I've always worked hard. I've always done the right thing for clients, candidates, everything else. I genuinely have no issue with that, but I've never been at 100%. And I've noticed a huge shift in my mind and my effort and my output over the last few weeks with adversity. And maybe it's because it's new, maybe it won't last, maybe it's not sustainable, I don't know. But whenever it's hard and I feel tired, there's always something bigger driving it. And so I don't know how to like best describe the emotion or the word, whether it's purpose or passion or whatever it is that's giving me the energy to build like Dadversity as a project. especially in the early days when it's tougher. But this has come from like just from personal experiences. So, you know, when we were, so it's essentially coming from when we were younger as kids, we had like a pretty unstable life. Like we you know, there's look, there's kids and people watching this as when they were kids who had much worse than me. So I don't regret it. We had like my mum was like did everything for us. She worked incredibly hard. She had 2-3 jobs just to keep like the roof over our heads as kids. Dad like moved out when I was like very young at 3. And unfortunately, mum probably made a couple of bad decisions in terms of the relationship she got into, which unfortunately for her and the kids like became quite abusive, and with guys who were drinking too much and probably didn't have the experience or the knowledge to take on the role of a dad, like a stepdad or something. And so all those moments in life that you remember as a kid growing up have essentially come full circle for me and fueled the desire to build diversity. And I don't know what you would call that. I mean, I don't know if you'd, I think probably calling it a passion project is definitely the wrong thing. That's why I've labeled it as so far. It's definitely not a passion project, but it's something that is a problem that needs solving, because since I've become a dad, I've realized how hard it is. And they are with like my obviously biological children. I don't know what it would be like being like a stepfather to kids who you probably don't have anywhere near as much influence over because the kids don't feel the same, or see you in the same way as their natural dad. So I imagine it's harder, and there's no real framework for stepdads, dads, like granddads, whatever, to do this. It's just difficult. And if you've had a bad day and your career's going bad and work's a big part of it, isn't it? But if you've had a bad day, work's going bad, you're not eating well, you're not exercising, I think you just automatically become like a worse father figure, a worse dad for your kids. I just do. Because I can only speak from my own personal experiences. When I'm out of shape and I'm lethargic and I've got less energy, I'm just not as proactive as a dad as I should be. And I think that's the problem that needs solving, because kids are learning behaviors today that are going to carry them through the rest of their lives. There's no question about it. The things you're seeing at the moment at such a young age are just going to like continue to compound over the rest of their life. And those experiences are going to be massive for them in whatever they choose to go on and do. So like, to your point, I'm not sure if it's passion or just solving problems that you can relate to, maybe. But there's just something more there when you've experienced the problem and you then go on to try and fix it firsthand. There's just more there to drive that emotional element, to put more into it, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, I would agree 100% about your happiness with your job influences your relationships.
Yeah,
with kids,
sure.
with your wife, with friends. Because I know when I'm not happy in a role, I can be an asshole, and it's not intentional. It's not I don't want to be that way. I don't want to feel that way. Sunday nights, if I'm in a role that I'm just not happy, Sunday nights I can probably shouldn't be around me, right?
Yeah.
Because I just can't stop thinking about the next day, right? And so yeah, and I think that's where no amount of money in the world, if I think about when I'm 80 and looking back on this time I have with my kids and the point in my life where I'm at, no amount of money between now and then would make me feel good about feeling that way on Sunday evenings, right? Like, and so
it's still hard, isn't it? Like it's not you don't move into a career that you're passionate about and you go, oh, the whole world's brilliant, it's really sunshine every day. Like it's still hard. You know, I was editing a podcast at like 1 a.m. this morning, and knowing that you're not getting any revenue for doing this for like probably 12-18 months, and you kind of have to churn through. Like it's not easy to just jump into your thing you're passionate about and just go. I mean, it actually, you know, I love football, like actual football, not this like week. Not soccer, sorry.
I did get you to say soccer once, and
no,
you just said it.
I can't say it. But I would never work in that industry because I know it's just something I enjoy as a hobby. And so I know if I worked inside of football, I'd end up just like probably watching less of it and not enjoying it as much. But hey, do you want to read out what Leah said, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead. Take it.
Okay, so to be able to do what you love and what brings you happiness is a huge privilege. To know what brings you fulfillment and joy is something greater, and can be a curse if you don't have the privilege to follow your passion. It's nothing else I can add to it. I just think she's right. I just don't. It just hits you differently, and I've never had this feeling before. Since launching a community, I've never had this feeling before. I don't know what it is and where it comes from, but if you could bottle it, it's just worth like the world. It's crazy. And so I do think there are people who are probably, lots of people who are in careers that they just can't stand, and actually, like, relatively speaking, when they zoom out in their whole life at the end of it, they probably go, I should have made that move. I should have just explored this more rather than churning through. But I also recognize it's hard as well, and there's actually some very real things that you need to sort out. I would never advocate someone into getting into a financial situation if they're struggling. I think you need to get your things sorted first, and that's not always easy.
Yeah, and I think that fear, right, of, well, I can't live on anything less. Well, you probably have it at one point in your life, right? So you can do it again, even with inflation. And I think it's never going to turn out as bad as you think it is. It may never turn out as great as you think it will.
Yeah.
But certainly most likely will never turn out as bad as you think it will. Those things you tell yourself in your head, like why you shouldn't do it or why you can't, it's probably more like why you can't.
Yeah.
Is the most limiting thing. And because it's just, you take it to these extremes of, I'll be completely broke, I'll be living on the streets, and probably not, right? Like you'll find a job, like what you and I are talking about. You'll find a way if you're motivated enough to make a change at, advanced part of your career. You're motivated enough to find options and ways to work within the constraints that you've built. Because 2 years ago, when I left my full-time role as a director of marketing to do my own thing, I had projects right out of the gate that helped. But then those projects, it's just up and down. And I think being in a situation that's kind of forced me to experience what it's like to have less money at certain months, certain stretches, has actually given me the confidence, like, hey, I can make this work. I can find ways. Even in a down economy, there's always a way, right? And it's just a matter of like, do you want it bad enough? And if you don't want it bad enough, then those things are going to look less attractive to want to do, right? And so, and I kind of getting back to the purpose thing too. I mean, it's such a big driver, because I think if you have a sense of purpose, it's not as much about you, really, right? And I think that, for me, has what's gotten me through tough times when I do things that I feel have a purpose. It's bigger than me. And that makes me not want to just say, well, I'm tired, I'll just go back to bed, or no, I don't feel like doing this. Now you're letting other people down, right? I think that's a huge thing. And so what I want to ask you, and when you were talking about purpose and passion, is you've mentioned this to me before, that you've received feedback from dads you've helped. How much has that given you that extra gear when you haven't felt like maybe doing something on a particular day? Like how important has that been to your motivation?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate in that I see whenever anyone joins a Facebook community, there's just a question in there. They choose to answer it or not. You don't have to answer it, but it's basically just like, what's your reason for being here? What can we do to help you? And I suppose it's there for 2 reasons, or 3 reasons really. I want to make sure everyone's like safe and not in any immediate kind of pressure, and don't need immediate like help. But also it kind of informs what content we should be putting in front of people that's going to be most valuable to them. And so, but in terms of feedback from dads, some of the messages that come through that qualifying question there before you join the group are just wild, to be honest, in terms of like the variety of situations that dads are in. And I mean, look, I won't share any of that stuff with you because I think it's important to keep that diversity community as a safe space for dads to share how they're feeling. But some of the positive stuff that comes out with it is different. And I got a message from a guy I've known since school, one of my good friends who, so just for context, we ran a challenge in diversity throughout the whole of August, run 5K a day, Monday to Friday. Travis, you alluded to it earlier. The purpose of the challenge isn't to get to dads to run 115K throughout the whole of August. I mean, look, if you go and do it, that's great and it's incredible. But we're really trying to hit the dads who are not moving at all and who want to just get started with the process to try and get fitter. And I think it was like day 8 or day 10 of the challenge or something. And I got a message from a dad who basically said, I know it's only been a week, so 7 days in. I know it's only been a week, but you've changed my life with this challenge. Sleeping better, less stress, more energy, more focus. Things seem easier. Got up at 5:30 with the boys today with no issues. Spent the day with them without just focusing on working all weekend and starting to work tonight on a Friday for the first time in a long time, where I haven't just wanted to cry. And like, I mean, that hits differently because it's a friend as well. And you don't realize sometimes what situation your mates are in, and you probably should do. But anyway, that's different episode for another day. In terms of the message, it just gives me way more fulfillment than anything I've seen in like my corporate life so far. It just gives me so much more energy to help more dads who aren't necessarily open about sharing those feedback and bits of comment, but actually feel the same way. And there's dads in that community today who are running 5K across America, across Australia, across the UK, across like various parts of South Africa. And you're just like, this is like, it's mental. Like, these are dads who haven't run before. There was a guy in Brighton who hadn't got on his bike for like 8 years, saw the challenge and just did 5K on his bike and was just like, wow, I've not done any exercise for that long. So the impact on me is massive. But to your point earlier, you just see a whole new level of like responsibility to keep helping these guys to do this stuff and not lose momentum, because once they lose it, they go back into the former habits and all that good stuff, all bad stuff. So yeah, the impact's mad. Just on a personal level, it's huge, and like I can't put it into words, to be honest. It's crazy what emotions you get off the other side. But you do feel a huge sense of like responsibility to keep this thing moving now, because you know that there are dads who are genuinely struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of where you're able to kind of get that grit and determination when things aren't going well, or you're always going to hit a dip, right? I mean, Seth Godin talks about that in his book, The Dip. No matter what you do, you're going to hit a dip. And it's how you get through that, because the other side, as he talks about, and what I've experienced, you probably experienced, the other side is much closer than you think. So yeah, and I know we're almost at time. This has been fun. Looking forward to doing it again next week. And I think really what we wanted to achieve by this is reason it's called Real-Time Career Pivot, because we're both going through a career pivot, and instead of going through it and then talking about it, I think it could be helpful to talk about it as we're going through it. Like, what are the challenges? How are we feeling week to week? They're going to have down weeks. We're going to have up weeks, and let's talk about it, right? In real time. I
want other people to jump up as well and talk about like career pivots that they've had in their life, because I think it's just quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, we see a lot of each other, and we can talk about the progress of our pivots and make sure that like we're on track and all that great stuff. But there's probably people here who are considering it and maybe want to just talk through the logic to make sure it makes sense and want some more advice, or who have done it years ago and it worked out, which would be incredible.
Yeah. So I think if anybody wants to be a guest, I think we could make that work and chat with them about it, and maybe spend the first 10 minutes of a quick update on what's going on with our pivot. successes, failures, stumbles, and then invite them on to then have a conversation. Talk about their challenges and successes too. So yeah, I'm totally down with that. And what's funny is whenever people start things like this, they only get better at it, right? And so it'll be fun to look back at this episode or this recording in a few months and just see how different it is compared to how it eventually evolves. And so we've already evolved our concept by just thinking about having people on as a guest. We didn't think about that yesterday when we had this idea. So it's going to evolve and it's going to be fun. So
only 3 months when I'm back in marketing and you're doing HubSpot stuff.
We're like, time to shut it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, man.
No, it's been good. Enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, thanks for hopping on, man. Have a great rest of your evening. And my day is just starting. So
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Cool. All right, man. See you later. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.